welcome back to IndieCent, the video game podcast for those who want to game on the cheap and a little out of the mainstream. Congratulations, everyone, we finally have a tagline.
Hey!
Bit long.
Will you come up with something?
Gaming podcast for the cheap-ass gamer.
That's terrible.
Yeah.
We'll keep working on it.
Welcome to IndieCent. Fuck the police. No explanation. Just...
Oh no, now Hillary Clinton's gonna blame us for her losing the election.
Welcome to IndieCent, home of the Barrett Ferret.
Barrett the ferret.
The ferret.
Did you guys see that?
Oh yeah, I saw the Barrett Ferret.
Oh my god, that man is a gift that keeps on giving.
Amazing.
Anyways, welcome back to IndieCent. Today we will be talking about, as we said last time, Stories Untold, a experimental text adventure game published in part by Devolver Digital, a rather famous indie developer and producer that I've been wanting to talk about for a very long time now. But before we get to that, we need to do our usual "What have you been playing?" segment. So, Danny, why don't you start us off there?
Okay, well, last episode I talked about a few games that I wanted to pass over in favor of talking about some other ones. So I'm going to talk about them this time. I got Sonic Mania when it came out, which I've always liked playing the 2D Sonic games, but I was never a huge fan of them because I grew up playing the 3D Sonic games, which I have an immense love for, and I will defend those to my death. But Sonic Mania it's a 2D Sonic game with a lot more polish than those games often got, and there's not a lot I can say about it other than if you like 2D Sonic, you'll love this game. It still has some of the pitfalls that came with those games. I'm not keen on a lot of the boss fights, but yeah, it's a good game. It's a first Sonic game in a long time that was actually made with some semblance of care put into it. So even if I didn't like 2D Sonic games, I would still spend money just for that alone. Because I love Sonic, and I'm glad it got a game with some care put into it. And you should buy Sonic Mania; it's good.
I can't wait for Rivals, which, by the way, Sonic Mania is technically a prequel to Forces. Sorry, I meant Forces. I forgot there actually is a Sonic Rivals game, and it sucks.
I've been saying on Twitter, but I would not be surprised if Sonic Forces gets canceled.
Oh no, it's gonna get made, and it's looking like it's gonna be a mess because they're doing a lot of very before Sonic 06 came out stuff already.
They're hardly showing it. They're not showing much from the game at all, and what's being shown is not very good.
It's a shame because the new villain is voiced by oh god, I actually forgot this. I should know this because the minute I read the name, I was like, oh, that guy. Just doing the edgiest fucking I'm so awesome thing. Oh god, I just remembered the theme song to release for the guy is a fucking rap song about how perfect and awesome he is. And the entire reason they picked the group to sing it was because their name was like a reference to his name as well. By complete accident. That's a Sonic thing to do there.
I can get behind that stuff if it's done like, I don't know, it's hard to describe. That's Sonic Forces is a game I will not play and will not talk about on here when that comes out. But I also started playing a couple mobile games. Some games I wish would get English releases, but figure never will. So I went ahead and say, okay, I'll delve into Japanese Google Play Store and download them. First started playing the Idolmaster Cinderella Girls Starlight Stage, or Dedede, as it's abbreviated. It's better Love Live School Idol Festival, just because you get actual 3D animations that look really good while you play and don't get in the way. And I don't know, there's not much else. They're pretty similar games outside of that. But I really wish it would get an English release, just because part of the reason why I come to these games, part of the reason I wanted to play Dedede isn't just for the gameplay, it's because I love the characters and want to see more stuff with them. But that's not much use to me when I can't understand what's happening in the little story segments. So that's a shame, but it's still fun. I really wish it would get an English release. And they also started Sinnoh Alice, which is a relatively new mobile game, kind of like Grand Blue Fantasy and Fate Grand Order, but this one's published by Square Enix and directed by none other than Yoko Taro. So I have some immense interest in that, as a huge fan of his games. Near Automata are like my favorite games ever. And it's, as far as those kind of gacha games go, it's a very good one. One interesting thing about it is it kind of takes the original concept of Nier before Nier became a Dragon Guard spin-off, where Nier was supposed to be a world where fairy tales sort of came to life and like out of their books. And that's basically what Sinnoh Alice is. You play as these different fairy tale characters, like the protagonist Alice from Alice in Wonderland. There's also Pinocchio, Red Riding Hood, Cinderella, and you have all these different playable characters, and you go through their different story modes, and you basically just fight these weird monsters and have a weird, dark, creepy Yoko Taro story to go along with it. And the designs are really good. The music's really good. It's from the same composer who did Dragon Guard 3, Nier Automata, Keiichi Okabe. He's a master at it. And I just wish this game so much would get an English release so I can understand what the story is, because I love Yoko Taro stories and want to know what's happening. Because everything else about the game is great. I love it. But yeah, that's a good mobile game, and I hope it doesn't die, because I'm afraid it's going to die. And then, aside from that, I've just been plugging away at more Yakuza 5. Put a few dozen hours into it lately, and it's a good game. It's a very good game. But I've talked about that before, so I'll move on. That's what I've been playing.
Alright, should we move on to Elmo?
How bad is the fire alarm noise?
It's
like
I can hear it.
Maybe sometimes the fire alarm just goes off for like 5 or 10 minutes. So Dark, if you want to tell us what you've been playing next, and then I'll just cross my fingers.
No, you better go, because now I can't edit it out without it being noticeable. So I'm just gonna make it a running joke.
It was that kid. He's getting revenge for VVVV burning down my house.
Elmo recording live from a burning building.
Yeah.
That's dedication, folks.
That is. I've been playing like 3 things, I think. Pretty small things. For my birthday, I played the best game of all time, which is the Wii U version of Wheel of Fortune.
Yeah.
I have no idea why I chose that, but my friend just said, "What do you want to do for your birthday?" And then he said, "Oh, I've nearly finished my Wii U collection. I just need to import a few more American-only games, like Wheel of Fortune." And I'm very impressionable, so I just said, "Yeah, let's do that."
Hold on. Is your friend collecting every single game for the Wii U?
He has.
He has.
He's done.
How big a collection is that?
Not the Japan only ones,
Yeah.
but
How big is their collection?
I really should know that. I think it's more than 150 games.
Wow.
But yeah, he has a complete Dreamcast collection too.
That's an impressive collection.
Yeah.
I have over 400 games on Steam, and only like 10 of them are smutty.
How many games do I have?
I have like 700 games on Steam,
Yeah.
and I've only played 5.
I have over 400 on Steam too.
So Wheel of
how
Fortune.
is-
Oh man, I'm really good at like completely useless word puzzle games. Like one of the RAMs was just, it's an animal. It's 3 words long. It's 5 letters, 5 letters, and 5 letters. And I was just like, solve! It's Great White Shark. Boom.
Holy shit.
Which, it's really handy when you're playing Wheel of Fortune, and it's really not handy when you're doing literally anything else. And, but it was pretty fun. Oh, some of the answers were so bad. One of the categories was thing, and the thing was amazing hiking experience. Which just... No. One of the categories was food, and the answer was just favourite food. Which again, not a real answer. And then one of
That
the
sounds like something I'd see on like an aesthetic Tumblr blog.
I think one of the RAMs was place, and the answer was just shady front porch.
That is a place.
God. But what else have I been doing? Oh yeah, I've been reading a visual novel series by this guy named Raymond Chandler. He does these kind of detective stories in visual novel form, and they're really good. If you've ever seen a really good Shane Black movie, like Kiss Kiss Bang Bang or The Nice Guys, they're along those lines. And one thing that I really like about them is that in keeping with the visual novel theme, some of them in like a limited edition were actually released in book form. So he's done a few of them. I've read The Big Sleep and Farewell My Lovely, and I've just really enjoyed them. They're books.
It sounds like my dog in the background is not a fan.
Maybe your dog is just trying to save me from the fire. Oh. But there is... I feel like it's appropriate that
Oh
we
my
have a
god,
fire
we're
on the
going into an Inhumans tangent. My dog can teleport. Oh no.
Yeah?
The worst thing CBS has ever made. Elmo, you're to blame.
Oh, I want to say
The fire-
Young Sheldon,
the-
even though that's not CBS.
The reason your fire alarm is going off is because it's warning you about the disaster of the Inhumans.
Ah,
It's young Sheldon in it.
I hate
and
it when that
then-
happens.
Oh, I forgot about young Sheldon and now I'm just sad.
Yeah.
Bazinga.
Well, prepare to get sadder. Because the last game I've been playing is Life is Strange Before the Storm.
Ooh.
Nah.
I love Life is Strange very much, but when I was playing through the beginning of it, I was just thinking, man, I wish Darkseid could see this. The first thing you do in the game is you stand dramatically on a train track, and when a train comes, you step out of the way at the last second. But the train... Yep. But the train has 1337 on the side of it.
I already hate this so much.
So, oh, it gets so much better. The first bit of gameplay you have is you're going to this old mill where this indie band are playing this secret concert, and there's a fence in the way, so you have to press A to jump over the fence, and when you press A, you jump over the fence, and then you turn around, and then you flip it off with both hands.
Honestly, same.
Then you keep walking, and your character's monologue goes, God, my mum would kill me if she knew I was doing this. And then you walk past an RV, and you write a Breaking Bad reference on the side of the RV. And I was just like, yes, oh, I need to film this and show Dark.
The fact that that game was made with scat voice actors is only like the 12th thing wrong with it based on everything you're telling me.
See, the thing...
It's legitimately great.
See, the thing about that is it doesn't sound any different from regular Life is Strange.
All you're doing is convincing me to never play Life is Strange.
No, Life is Strange is...
Especially,
it's good.
especially because I know what happens at the end.
Yeah, it's fair.
Oh,
But yeah, I still
God,
don't know if I'm gonna invest in before the storm. But yeah, that sounds like more Life is Strange, which isn't necessarily a bad thing.
I honestly love everything about Life is Strange, and I know that there's bits where
Did they mention fidget spinners?
No, but one of the characters does say hella.
Of course.
Yeah. I do like how I saw someone on Twitter be like, I was trying to get into the game, but the clunky teenage dialogue, I just couldn't, it just ruined the immersion for me. And I'm like, 5 minutes into Life is Strange, they established that time travel is a thing.
To be fair, time travel is more believable than a kid actually saying hella.
Go fuck yourself, E.
I'm only saying this to prove a point, but when I was a teenager and when I went to college, which is, I guess college in Britain is high school in the US, do you know what our slang word was? It was what we said instead of owned. Can you guess what it is?
Owned.
No, much worse. It was rinsed.
Rinsed.
I have no idea why.
Ugh.
And I moved into the school like halfway through the year, so I just came from a normal school, and then I just came in and everyone was going like, "Oh mate, you got rinsed blood." And at one time I was walking down the corridor and somebody else fell over and somebody else just said out loud, "What a rinse!" And I play Life is Strange, and it's like somebody says hella, and somebody else is like, "Oh, this dialogue is so unnatural and cringeworthy," and I'm like, "Yeah, they're teenagers, 10 out of 10.
Listen, I've only heard one other person in the world say hella before Life is Strange, and it was Eric Cartman in a 90s episode of South Park.
Rinsed?
Okay, yeah.
So yeah, there's my defense.
Rinsed is like, it's almost as bad as calling tic-tac-toe knots and crosses.
Ugh.
Which I didn't realize was a thing that happens over there.
It does. A thing that happens over there. We play noughts and crosses, and then Ricky Gervais just comes out of the game.
Yeah.
Anyways,
fuck off, fire alarm.
Still going.
Sorry, it's still going. Does this all the time.
I'll just go ahead and go to the games I've been playing. Because I had to focus on surviving Hurricane Harvey, I had not been playing it that much lately. I mainly just been dealing with hardcore gaming 101 stuff. I finally got Chronicles of Teddy. Well, I didn't finish it. I just looked up the ending and final few areas online because I reached the third boss, and then I decided, yeah, I'm done. It's so bad. It is genuinely one of the worst bosses I've ever seen. The way the level's set up is you're in this like grid-like area, like tunnels a worm travels through, and you have to activate these ice traps to freeze it in place so you can hit it. The problem is, one, the worm moves randomly throughout the level, so you never know where he's going to come from or where he's going to go or how he's going to turn. Two, if you manage to activate a trap and hit him with it, he will still keep moving for like 2 seconds or so, just slowing down until he stops. 3, if he does it in a vertical tunnel, you will not be able to hit him. 4, you can only activate traps near you. 5, you have to do it with the god stupid musical flute thing where you have to stop what you're doing and play a song while the game is still going. So it's not like free action and like Ocarina or something. So while you're fumbling around to play the song in order to hit the worm, and it has to be when it's near you at that point, it will probably be moving slowly along, but just fast enough to still hit you. And if you get stuck behind it, because the invincibility time in this game is so short when you get hit, you will get hit at least 4 or 5 times before the worm gets out of your way. So, It's a terrible, terrible boss fight, and it made me go like, no, I'm done with this bullshit. Holy shit. It's like a doable boss, but it's so annoying because everything is just random chance. Whenever something goes wrong, it never feels like it's because of what you did. It's just because the game was like, well, fuck you. Do.
Is it doable, or is it hella doable?
No.
Yes.
No.
Sponsored by Vicky Gervais.
Well, once I got that game out of the way, I took a break and just played something I wanted to play for a while, you know, to get over the whole almost flooded house hurricane stress. We got off with no damages, so no worries there.
Hey.
So I finally started playing Magical Diary, a game released by Hanako Games, who you may recognize as the single most weeabo studio on the face of the earth.
I remember Magical Diary.
Like, if you see... Yeah, I actually like it quite a bit. Even the parts that are clearly stupid and weebo-ish, like when they had to make up pronouns for Ghost. It's like, guys, you could have just used, you know, neutral pronouns that already exist and not just remove the H from all of them. It's like the letter E is now a pronoun in that game. I can't make that up. But yeah, it's really cute. I'm probably going to play more of it because I didn't do either of the lesbian routes yet. I just did Damien's route, and I was surprised by how kind of fucked up it was. So kudos on them for that. I also like that all the dungeons in the game are really creative in how you can use the spells you've learned to solve a problem. Like, apparently people are still finding ways to solve things, which is neat. After that, I went ahead and started playing something for Hardcore Gaming 101, which I need to finish this month, which should be easy because I'm loving it. I'm playing through the entire Lisa trilogy. It's really, really, really good.
You dandy fuck. I've been saying that so much lately.
For those who don't know, Lisa is a series of 3 games, sort of. It's confusing because of the way they're released. There's a Yume Nikki alike called Lisa that's now just known as Lisa the First, where you play as Lisa, and it's very, very depressing because you find out through abstract imagery that she's an abused child whose entire life is so focused on the horrible things her dad put her through that she can't move past it, and it's implied she dies at the end. So fun.
What if actual sunlight was more depressing?
The next game, which is just called Lisa on the Steam store because they decided to make this as confusing as fucking possible, is Lisa the Painful, which I'm playing right now. I'm about halfway through. And it's about a man named Brad living in the post-apocalypse where all women seem to have just disappeared. And it's a world run entirely by men, and it's sort of like if the Halloween hack, that kind of very teen Earthbound hack that Toby Fox did, was written by an actual adult. So it's still gross and immature and kind of fucked up. But when it brings up the bigger ideas, it works. Like, this is a game partly about, like, the cycle of abuse and abusive parents and all that. And that works while it's still making jokes like a man who is so bad at driving a bulldozer that he killed his wife by accident. His priest had to tell him that he could have saved his wife if he was just good at driving a bulldozer, and then his grandfather came in to say that he sucked at his wife's funeral. All in dramatic flashback.
I love that game.
And he's just like, you know what? I don't feel like fighting you right now, so I'm gonna go. But because he's bad at driving the bulldozer, he rams right into you.
Yeah.
There's like a small part where you burn a bunch of orphans alive by complete accidents involving a bucket, And it's actually connected to the bulldozer joke because the guy who was looking after the orphans was the guy who was supposed to get the bulldozer driver certificate in the first place. He even says it's like, this is only the second most depressing thing that's ever happened in my life. The entire game is like this. So far I've been to fish like reverse mermaid court, where one reverse mermaid, a talking fish with legs who didn't understand the other talking fish, basically just kept telling the judge that I wanted to bang his wife. And he's in my party now, by the way. There's like just a bunch of random weirdos who will join your party for seemingly no reason. I think my favorite of them so far is the samurai who likes cats. And he's like, do you like cats? And you say yes, like, okay. And he joins you. Just like that. It's really silly, but it's also incredibly soul-crushing, depressing. And I know what's going to happen at the end of it, and I'm prepared for it. And I also know what's going to happen in Joyful, and I think that's actually making me appreciate the game more, because I keep coming across little moments that are foreshadowing that stuff, and it just makes me go, oh, it's Weird Al, the most important character in all of Lisa. There's just Weird Al in a half shirt blowing a trumpet on a mountain, and he's the most important character in the whole game. That's just like, you gotta play Lisa, just be warned, it's heavy. It's very heavy and very, very morbid. Like, this game makes a lot of jokes with like suicide and really dark stuff, but it's just also generally fucked up from the word go that it works. It's hard to describe. I also want to mention before I end here that there's a company on Steam you might have noticed by now called Sakura Game. There's no space in their dev's title. They're a Chinese company, and they've been putting actual porn games on Steam for like pennies.
True heroes.
And it's fascinating. I'm actually trying to write an article about this on how they're getting past like Steam rules and the loopholes they use. And it's just, I'm also just kind of impressed they're managing to do this. They released one recently that I just got called Cat Girl, which if you go on DL's site, you will eventually find with its actual name. And it's like the name of the character, like Phantom Thief, something, I forget the rest. And the funny part is that when you actually open the game through Steam, the actual game's title is on the title screen instead of the one they made up. Okay. And it's just a straight up BDSM torture porn game. And they barely changed anything and all the scenes are already unlocked. I'm just like, how did they get away with this? Holy shit. And the best part is they actually do make their own games too, and they're increasingly ridiculous. One day I'm gonna make you guys play Superstar because it is just magical. They just straight up take images and trace over them from like Google image search for like actual celebrities, so you eventually get to meet Sheldon.
Ah,
I'm not joking.
I am never playing that.
And now the next game they've made that's going to come out later this month called Mirror is basically just another game they made before called Hellgirls, except unbelievably horny, and they somehow included a molesting mini game. I'm just like, they're not even subtle about it. You can go on the page and the screenshots, you clearly know what they're doing, and they even have a video of the fucking molesting game as the main trailer. That they have not been taken down by Steam. And a lot of their games even have like news updates that tell you how to get refunds. We're going to be talking about them one day. I just want to let you all know that this amazing company exists. Oh, the best part, I actually found the guy in charge. I found his blog on a Chinese website, and he has a quote there in English on his page that just says, I don't want sex because life fuck me every day. This man is now my hero. God bless the Republic of China.
I'm just picturing like Toko the reject demon, but every character is Sheldon. That is my hell.
Oh god. This episode has gotten off to a great start.
I can't tell if we're talking about young Sheldon or Splatoon Sheldon.
There is no Splatoon Sheldon. There's only... Was it like Splat or something
There is
like
no
that?
hell.
No, there's a
only
character
Sheldon.
named Sheldon in Splatoon. He's the little minion one that sells you weapons.
I hate it now.
Splatoon, terrible.
Plus, I think that counts as a pun.
Yes, it does.
I'm sorry, everyone. Splatoon is bad now.
Yeah.
Except the short one with the actual gun with the squishy face. He's good. Anyways, let's get on to our main topic. Alright, today we are, as I mentioned before, we are talking about Stories Untold, which in my notes I have written down as Untold Stories, and I keep doing that for some reason. This is a game made by a developer named No Code, and I didn't get to check if they made anything else, but I don't think they have. But the publisher is Devolver Digital, who are like basically the big name in the indie game scene right now. You may have heard of them recently when they did that E3 video press conference parody thing that had like Suda51 appear for a moment just to say, wait, what am I doing here? And had a woman pull out a gun and fire it rapidly as she was slowly going into like that one Microsoft guy yelling about developers over and over mode. Yeah, they have like connections with the same sort of people who work with Adult Swim on their live action shows, so they do stuff like that from time to time. And they're also responsible for publishing games like Always Sometimes Monsters, one of my personal favorites, Enter the Gungeon, Hotline Miami, of course the big one. Let's see, No, Not a Hero, Broforce, and a bunch of other great stuff that I can't remember off the top. Oh, Oli Oli, the skateboarding game. I could go on.
They're basically like they're the biggest indie publisher out there.
And I just remembered that one of the main guys was actually referenced in Lisa. There's a guy, if you go to one of the houses, and I think in the first area, who will like tell you about some amazing invention and wants you to invest in it. And he's this guy with big weird
Fork
hair
Parker.
and like a kind of
Yeah.
Fork Parker. And if you invest in his product, he just gives you a note that says sucker. This is a perfect representation of the Fork Parker character, who is totally a real person.
Yep. Fork Parker tweets on Twitter. That's how you know he's real.
I love Devolver Digital because usually for E3 they just rent a studio, like a parking lot adjacent to the actual main area for E3, because they can never get a permit to go in E3, and just serve beer and have a party.
Have you seen like the updates every year with what happens? Like after that first started happening, mysteriously someone started renting out trailers to block all the entrances into those parking lots.
Apparently it's what's inspired them to make that video, and that's just great. Like they've been planning for a while, but then that happened, like, okay, we're doing it.
Yes, it's crazy. Devolver Digital's great. They put out a lot of great stuff.
Yeah, their big thing as a publisher is that they want to have an image, and that's not something you see often. They kind of remind me of what Adult Swim Games is doing. Yeah, like how they actually, Adult Swim Games released a game that looked kind of similar to this at first glance, called, I think it was Big Radio Small Televisions, I forget exactly, but like, yeah, they both experiment a lot in the different type of games they help release. Oh, I think Devolver Digital also published Super Hot.
Did they?
Which is, yeah, I could totally see them publishing that. Yeah, they don't stick to one particular genre or one particular audience. They branch out and just picks like generally weird and stylish stuff, which would explain why they would pick up Stories Untold, which is like presents itself as a horror anthology series like you would see in like 1980s television, and with like sort of a Stranger Things thing going on, except it's actually a text adventure game that keeps changing its gameplay slightly with each of the 4 episodes you play. I've never seen a game quite like this. In fact, when I suggested it, I didn't even know exactly what it was. They literally couldn't show most of the gameplay in the trailer because it doesn't really translate to an exciting trailer.
When I loaded this up to play, I plugged in my controller. And I was like, oh, it's a keyboard-only game. I'll just set the regular key bindings. And then like I started up, and it's this computer, and I'm like, okay, I guess I gotta press something, and then I'll fill in, and then the game will start. And then like it's just making random letters from the buttons on the controller, and like nothing's do I actually have to type something? And so I had to like put down the controller and pick up the computer, and like try and figure it out. And then after a few times, like, oh, this is the game.
Welcome to the text adventure genre. Yeah, this genre has been mostly dead for a long time. Like, the last time anyone talked about a text adventure game seriously was when Frog Fractions happened. So that should give you an idea of just how long it's been since we've seen a real text adventure release. And I don't think anyone was expecting it to be like this.
No.
This game is wild with all the stuff it tries pulling. Let's not get into spoilers too fast and just like basically explain the premise of all the different episodes. The first episode has you playing a game called The House Abandoned in like an old I'm trying to remember the name of that computer. It was an old like Commodore 64 ass thing.
Yeah, I mean that obviously that wasn't it. It was some name I've never heard. But it was like, yeah, it was the like the monitor is basically one of those old CRT TVs, like the kind I only ever saw in my grandma's house in her basement, and then like hooked up to like a keyboard, like an old ass keyboard that you have to play a game. You have to put a tape into, like a cassette tape into the keyboard to play it.
Yeah, that was the thing we used to do.
Yeah.
Well, people used to do. I was not born until 1990.
One of those things that was at like the last cutscene of Metal Gear Solid 5, because I think that's what Metal Gear 1 was played on. One of those things.
Yeah, I think that was the PC-98 for Metal Gear. Maybe something a little earlier, because I know 2 was on the 98 at one point. Oh well. But like basically this game takes place sometime in the 1980s, maybe the 90s, really early. It's never quite clear on that. I'll explain later when we get to spoilers, but so everything's like really dated and very pulpy. Like the room you start out in is a very warm, like old house room with like some pictures of some cute kids, this old computer, this old TV. So you start playing it, and the game you play is like a really simple text adventure game where you're some guy who's come home at some point. Your dad has left you a message telling you how like to get a generator on, and that he has a surprise for you. So you explore the house, you get an idea of what it's like. There's like one locked room. You go upstairs, you can explore your sister's room, and eventually go to your room. And then that's where the game is like just starts fucking
and
with
then you start playing the game.
But it's not the same game. Yeah, it loads up again, and now the screen on the screen in your screen is.
We can save that for spoilers. What happens when you get to the room?
No, I think it's important because that's just the first area. Like, when I'm talking about spoilers, I mean what the game is actually about, not... Yeah, I won't reveal everything the room does, but basically, it becomes the horror game you thought you were going to play as you guide around the same character, but except now he's really scared and the house is, like, dilapidated. There's all sorts of disgusting stuff around, like a carcass on the kitchen table and stuff written out in blood. And then this is where you start to realize, oh, it's going to be this kind of game.
You start hearing noises upstairs, and the noises are you, because you're playing the game.
Yes, yes. Your alarm goes off and you have to turn it off with the computer, and it's an alarm in your room flashing numbers at you.
Because it's not just a text adventure. What you're seeing on the screen is you're sitting at a desk with the computer in front of you on the side, and there's stuff on the side like pictures, a telephone, a clock, stuff like that. So you've got this other stuff in front of you and just the computer off to the side that you're inputting the text onto.
So when the second game happens, suddenly the protagonist in that game is in your world, apparently, and he actually hears the noise. And as you're playing the game, the text adventure is describing how he's feeling about the noise and realizing that someone else is there, and you're guiding him up to your room.
And you're
because
both
that's how you're
completely terrified of each other. And they're both kind of you.
It's such a brilliant idea, and it just throws you off. And I was playing this back, just right when Harvey was coming into my area. So, boy oh boy, was it fun to hear that alarm clock when I was currently terrified of tornado warnings that were going off constantly on my phone. Yeah, maybe not the wisest idea I've ever had. But yeah, that section really sets you up for what you're going to experience for the rest of the game. And since it's set up like an anthology, Episode 2 takes a sci-fi turn with you helping some people at a lab do something, but you're not sure what. Episode 3 apparently takes place in a post-apocalypse. Well, no, during the apocalypse. Like a week after, there's something out there, and you're just putting out messages through what's the word? Morse code? Yeah, that's it. And
episode
then the
3 is the walkthrough episode.
And episode 4 combines elements of all of them, and I will not talk about that one until we get to spoilers.
Episode 4 is strictly spoiler territory.
Yeah, so each episode of the game has a different theme and a different way to play it. The first area is a straight-up adventure game that screws around with who the actual player character is. Episode 2 is just follow the directions and mess with machinery sort of thing. And then it reveals the big twist, and you go back to text adventure again. And then episode 3 is you sending out Morse code while you're listening to people in other stations while you don't have a working microphone. And when you get thrown out of your station and have to walk around, then we head into spoilers territory, like really heavy. I really like how this game keeps changing up what you're actually doing each time, even if it doesn't always work. Because it keeps you on your toes on what it's going to do, so you can never get in a groove of what to expect. It's always something different, even in episode 4, which uses the fact that you're playing a bunch of playstyles you've already played before to really screw with you. And it doesn't even change mechanically significantly, which is impressive. But I think Danny mentioned when we were talking about earlier that you had problems with optimization and the graphics.
Yeah, it was the biggest. It was honestly the biggest problem with the game for me, because I good game, great great presentation, great story. I love it. But optimization issues frustrate me so much. I meant to and forgot to try putting it on like the lowest quality graphics and see how it played. I forgot to do that. But like just I had so many just frame drops and just it played so slowly, and during some of the walking sections, because those start popping up, like it was just terrible frame rate. It made it almost unplayable because I had no idea where I was in space in any given moment, because I could just move a little and I'm looking somewhere else entirely because the frame rate couldn't keep up. I don't have the greatest computer. In fact, it's pretty bad. But this game should not, like, even on the highest quality graphics, it should not be intense on my graphics card like this. It should not be breaking my graphics card. Like I've been able to play games like Spec Ops: The Line, like fine, no problem, not perfect frame rate, but like playable. Like this level of graphical quality, it's not bad, but it's not like it's not Final Fantasy 15 pushing the limits. It's Unity graphics still, and I don't know. It made me angry, and it ruined a lot of tense moments for me. That I would just have to deal with frustration over these optimization issues. That it should not be happening. It can ruin a game when you don't optimize your game well. And I guess it kind of relates to a discussion that was big a few weeks back about, because this game was made in Unity, I noticed in the credits. And like I remember a lot of discussion a few weeks back about Unity as a game engine. Is it a bad engine, or are games that use Unity, is that a not mark off of them? And I absolutely do not believe so. I don't think Unity is to blame for this, and I think it's just a problem with not optimizing your game well. If you have this much happening on a screen with these kind of graphics, and you're still having frame drops on a computer that should be able to run them, there's a problem you need to fix. I really think that stuff should get patched or fixed or somehow.
I was actually thinking on this because I think it's an issue with like the way the foundation of the game is. Because if you look on the store page, it mentions that the first episode of the game was released as its own thing before this final version was done. So that tells me all the other episodes are based off the foundation they made for that game, but that game didn't have any movement sections.
Mm-hmm.
So it was just worried about like doing a little graphical stuff to for the sake of atmosphere and focusing on the text part for gameplay. And like when you're just like doing like messing around with equipment or stuff, it works fine. The problem is when you have to walk. So I think, and it also looked really strange to me. Like it didn't look like in-game graphics, if that makes sense. It almost sort of looked like slightly blurry cutscene graphics.
I had a lot of that problem with walking sections. I'd try and focus on objects, but it would just be extremely blurry.
Yeah, I think they were trying to make a section sort of like how games made with Valve's old engine, I forget what they call it, the one they used for like Half-Life 2, is
Source
very...
Filmmaker?
No, just...
Yeah,
the Source engine, that's it.
Man,
like...
that wasn't supposed to be a joke, and now I feel dumb as shit.
Yeah, the way Source is built is that it's a very physics-focused engine, which is why so many of their games made with it were focused on screwing around with physics. Like the entire reason Portal really happened was partly because of what they managed to do with the physics engine. And so it's like trying to have walking sections that use engine of that sort, but the foundation they've already coded for the first episode doesn't really take anything like that into account, so they had to like build something that can be that from what they've made, and what they've also made is really like graphically intensive for this sort of experience. Like, I don't think I've played a game that looks quite this good before on my computer. I think that's partly because they normally don't have to worry about moving around or like complex motions, so they can like make these still moments as pretty as they possibly can. But if you want to keep up that graphical fidelity when it comes to parts where you actually have to move, then you head into the big problem where the game is overloaded and it can't really keep up with itself.
And I can fully believe that's the problem. And I think they should have just straight up taken out the walk-in section, because I don't think they themselves add anything to the game. So they end up just kind of detracting by causing those performance issues.
I think you could take it out in episode 3 and like try doing something a bit simpler. Like, just like make it like an old adventure game where you just move where you want to go and you're on the next screen after a transition. But I think that would have hurt episode 4 because of the mood it ends up creating and what it ultimately reveals. You kind of need to be able to move around to get like the full impact they were going for. But I'll get into that. I'll get more into my thoughts on that later.
I had a lot of troubles with the lighting in some of the walking parts, especially on episode 4, when you'd just be walking around, and again, like, the frame rate's dropping a bit, you're moving kind of jerkily, and it doesn't help that you can barely see any of the rooms that you're supposed to be exploring. And also the game crashed twice for me on episode 3, until, like, the next time I played, I just had to set the graphics setting to low.
Episode 3 is the one that gets the big crashes. I thankfully did not have any crashes, but yeah, there was one thing I had to find in episode 4 that was in a very dark room, and like I couldn't find it for so long just because I couldn't see it in the dark.
Part of the problem is also the angles they used, because you don't have free range of vision like you would in like a normal first-person moded game. You just... Actually, now that I think about it, it is sort of like old adventure games where you pick one direction, move that, and the screen transitions, except you're given the illusion of movements, so you're making the transition happen, and that results in a very clunky experience because it's still angling the game like you're doing like a point and click with set screens that has transitions. So the angles aren't really mapped out properly to work like normal human sight would, so it's just like it doesn't take into a full account of what you can and can't see at a given moment, or that you, if there's like any way for you to turn a specific way naturally. Like, it's not, there's no exploring in those sections because you want to. There's exploring in those sections because you're trying to figure out what the fuck you're supposed to do.
And it's the biggest flaw of the game. Those walking segments not being designed too well, and the issues with frame rate and movement that they add to the game. And
I'll also throw in 2 more big ones. You mentioned text speed, and that really didn't bug me in like the first episode where it's very slow and atmospheric and you're like, what's going on? But when it comes back in episode 4, it does bug me because the story is moving at breakneck speed and you just want to skip over text you've already seen.
It still bugged me in the first episode just because it takes so long for the text to load. And there's no way to skip it, no way to start inputting your next input anyway. Like if you go into, like, say you're in the living room and you've already read, okay, here's the text screen for when you're in the living room, just describing everything around you. You go to the kitchen, you get something, and then you go back. You have to wait for it all to load again so that you can say go upstairs, but I've already seen it. I wanna go upstairs now. And if, like, I'm fine not being able to skip it if it was just faster, because I was reading so much faster than it was loading, and it it didn't have huge huge walls of text, but episode 4 did. And like, honest to God, there would be spots in episode 4 where just this wall of text would take like a minute, a couple minutes to load, just so I can do the next thing, and it kills the pace of that game and annoys the hell out of me. I just pick up my phone and browse Twitter until I stop hearing the text going, so I can read it, type in my next input, and then like pull out my phone again for another 2 minutes while I wait to put in the next input. And it's a shame, because otherwise those sections are really cool.
The bits in episode 2 and 3 when there's machinery that you need to operate, I remember, I don't know if it was my computer or if I was clicking in the wrong place, there's parts where it will say click on this kind of switch and pull it up and hold it up until you reach a number. Yeah. That took like 7 minutes and time of just me
That's because you're supposed to pull up all the way to the top of the screen to the point where the camera's starting to point upwards in an unnatural direction, so it actually goes fast.
And it still takes forever, because especially in episode 3 where it's like, okay, start off at 0, now take it to 8,000 or something, and like I would do that and just hold it at the fastest it's going to go, and I would just have to hold that and turn on my phone and browse for a few minutes.
Did you realize did you realize what those buttons were for?
I did not. But
I did, but you could only access the buttons. Easier. I could only access the buttons when I was zoomed in by right clicking.
But
this is when you said it was poorly optimized, I also thought that you meant because there was a lot of stuff on screen. Well, a lot of stuff that was intended to be on screen that on my computer just wasn't. Mm-hmm. And I would zoom in and be like, oh, there was a button there the whole time. And it still goes up really slowly, but there's a button.
And like just the fact that it goes so slowly, it gets like, that's annoying in and of itself. But if you take too long, you'll start, like, the people giving you instructions to do this will start saying, what are you doing? Go to this channel. And I'm like, motherfucker, I'm doing it. It's making me angry at the game. That's like, okay, the game, like, you should have made this faster. Like, I'm already annoyed at the game. But then the game itself is getting mad at me for taking so long. I'm like, just like, no, it's your fault. You're the game, it's your fault.
I wanted to say before we moved on that I liked how slow the text was in episode 1, because the point of that part was to be strange and unnerving, and you didn't actually want to continue at that point.
I get that. I think it was just still a little too slow.
Yeah, but going back to the Pandora's box we just opened, yeah, episode 3 is like probably the low point of the entire game for me. I like ideas it has, but the microfilm, I hate it.
Oh yeah,
I hate the microfilm.
I tried to use the microfilm at first, and like just trying to work the machine and trying to read everything. I didn't even bother. I took one look at it and I was just like, no. Walkthrough it is. I
mean, it's bad enough I'm having to figure out, like, I have to keep finding codes in the microfilm in order. It's bad enough I have to type in codes to send these messages, but I have to get them from the fucking microfilm, and they're all pages apart, and it takes forever to go through each page. Why isn't this like an instruction book? Mm-hmm. I mean, come on, this is a little ridiculous. Like, I had no problem with episode 2 because it was easy to figure out where what you need to do next was and how to do it. But episode 3 just, like, really pushes it.
Like, if it would have been better if they, instead of like the whole microfilm machine, just tab and like bring a manual up on screen and you just flip through the pages. It just, like, as like a pop-up, you hit tab, just get a pop-up with the physical manual, and you just click, okay, next page. I think that would have just been a much better, easier, and still fits the theming of it very well, that you actually have to work through these problems like you're this person sitting in a research station. I don't understand why it had to be an obtuse microfilm machine.
There is payoff for it in episode 4 that I think is kind of clever presentation wise, but it's not worth it. It's not worth it.
By that time, you've got into the mindset of just, no, I'm using a walkthrough for all of these bits because they're terrible.
Yeah, it's funny I mentioned Chronicles of Teddy because I hate that game, and I have, even though it is beautiful, but like everything we're talking about is like the same reasons I hate that game. Like this game and that game are both like really beautiful, like generally some of the best looking games that are kind, and like the main gameplay is fine, but there's so many little problems that it starts to add up. The difference is that Chronicles of Teddy had like no depth to it, and it was constantly imitating dozens of other games and worse. Like the full title of the game is Chronicles of Teddy, and then it's like a melody of Exodus or something like that. I'm like, are you serious? Are you really gonna reference Symphony of the fucking Night in your fucking sequel to the Voring the Little Girl game? Are you really gonna do this? Oh yes, look it up. Finding Teddy has a lot of scenes where the little girl gets bored.
What is a teddy? A miserable little pile of fluff?
Terrible mascot
But
character.
yeah, but yeah, this game has a lot of similar problems. The difference is that it's not doing a bunch of stuff you've seen before except worse. It's doing a bunch of stuff nobody's ever seen in a video game except the text adventure stuff, and that hasn't been done in forever. So it's more forgivable for me, especially once you reach the end and you realize just what it's doing, and just it has good payoff. This game, Chronicles of Teddy, is just an imitator. This game is an original, and if it's original, I can put up with a lot more horse shit, especially if it manages to accomplish some of what it's trying to do in this game. Once you reach episode 4, I think it really accomplishes a lot, and I was like surprised by what it ends up being. Kind of a sort of expected story for this format, but it pulls it off so well in such a clever way that I was just kind of shocked how good it was. And now I think we should get into the spoilers.
I'm in kind of two minds over, if we're getting straight into spoilers, I'm probably about to say the line that really spoils it, if that's okay. But I'm kind of in two minds, because on the one hand I do think that a lot of the foreshadowing makes sense with the ending, and it does genuinely manage to tie in 3 completely different storylines into this one. Oh, they all meant this, and oh, it's a big story. But I also feel like the kind of hype that I got from the different episodes, like, oh, episode 1, what's going on? There's a stranger in your house, but it's you. And episode 2, you're in a lab, and there's these weird... You're doing a dissection on something, but it's a robot. And episode 3, you're stuck in this, like, Antarctic power station, but what's going on? And people are being attacked by something. And then episode 4, it's just, you drove drunk and you killed someone.
Yeah.
It's all a metaphor for you drove drunk and you killed someone, and then you tried to hide that you drove drunk, and that's about it.
There's a bit more to it, and I'll explain it in a moment.
There is more,
a lot of this game is foreshadowing. I actually went and checked out TV tropes, and I was surprised to find this game actually had a page there, and it was like respectably sizable. Like people actually cared to write about it, so that's a good sign. But they had a pretty big list of all the little things they noticed that were hinting at stuff. They also mentioned an interpretation that didn't actually occur to me when I first played it, that I wrote down. And I wrote down some of my own stuff. So let me point out all the little ways this game hints at what's coming, and also just throws in some weird shit just for the hell of it. Let's see. The main character, James, we actually get a last name for him. I think it's Iton. Killed his sister Jennifer in a drunk driving accident and left her alone in the car. And in doing so, he basically assured that she was going to die. And he did this because he wanted to put his whiskey in the other driver's car to frame him. The thing is, that bottle of whiskey was a gift from his father, and he had a note on him explaining that it was a gift from his father, so he did not get away with anything. Even when he finally admits it to the doctor what's going on, it's suggesting that everyone knew and they just needed him to say it in order to get all this mess over with. So yeah, it's an incredibly terrible thing he did. And the way it builds up to it is actually kind of clever. Episode 1 is like nothing but foreshadowing, and there's some obvious ones like the 1986 being painted in like blood on the wall, and like stuff like that's not subtle. But then there's like other stuff, like when you go in Jennifer's room and look in her drawer, I think the pictures he finds are of a forest road, just like a random forest road, and you're not really sure what the significance of this is. If you look at some of the information you get in episode 4, like on the microfilm, the accident took place on a forest road, and those pictures are the pictures of the area where the accident eventually occurred. There's also other little stuff like its car in the second part of episode 1 being warped like it was in an accident, and the note is telling you to get out of the car, get out of the car. Let's see. Hang on here, I got this all written down. Of course, there's the solar door, we all know that. Episode 2, the flashes you see when you look in the alien robot are actual memories of the accident that we don't really get to see otherwise. And like, it's important Jennifer's face pops up there. When the alien is going into light during the text adventure part of that episode, it's James remembering when he was going into the light of the officers who were arriving at the scene. Episode 3 has a lot of big ones, obviously, but there's a subtle one. There's an abbreviation in the microfilm called GCS with its meaning blacked out. And once you reach episode 4, you realize it means Glasgow Coma Scale, and it measures the unconscious levels of a patient, because he caught a brief glimpse of his surgery, so he saw this device. The first letters of the 4 words on the first page of the microfilm end up spelling coma, so that's not so subtle. And the credits in all 3 episodes, because the game, each episode has that cool opening and ending credits. The ending credits in the first 3 episodes include James on the list as the driver, another driver's name, and some other people who were at the accident, including some medics and some officers. And you never really hear their names again, but before you even reach episode 4, if you notice that in the credits, which it's hard to do because they fly by, that makes you wonder, hey, wait, I didn't see any of these people in this. So it's kind of a big, subtle wink to the audience that there's a lot you don't know yet. One little touch I liked in episode 4 was when you briefly hear his mom talking and she sounds disgusted with him. I didn't realize it at first, only like very recently, but the reason they knew that it was his bottle in the car was not just because it was one given to him by his father, but because he had the note on him, and obviously the police would have checked and found the note already. So the parents would know as well, for sure. So like, I like that the game doesn't tell you quite all the details of everything, but if you pay attention, you can piece together just how horrifically bad what this man did actually is. The reason he's feeling guilt for the murder, like when it eventually just seems like it was an accident he was involved in. It's because you realize, oh my god, he actually did kill this girl because he didn't do the right thing and try to get her out of the car while it was still like a fuming mess. He basically is the reason she's dead, not just because of the accident, because he didn't do the bear's most simple human thing to help her. It's like, wow, that's pretty fucking heavy. Yeah, the game just goes really all in on getting you in this character's mind space in episode 4, and you, by the end of it, even if you don't get all those little details, you understand why he would feel this much guilt, and it's impressive how well it does it, and it uses the imagery from every other episode to really convey this. Especially like Jennifer appearing in the TV in episode 1, or the microfilm showing details on the accidents, or the lab area actually being like a sort of surgery setup with James himself appearing in the monitor. It's like little things like that stick out.
There's one bit of foreshadowing that I really, really loved, but I don't really like how it was presented. Because lots of the things you said, like how the first letters of those pages of the microfilm spell coma. When you revisit the snowy place in episode 4, it kind of spells that out for you, and it says, "Hey, look, coma." And it repeats some of the lines, and there's some things that are really self-explanatory, like, oh, you find all these pictures of a country lane. There's a car crash that took place on the country lane. The bit in episode 3, there's a few voices that you hear before you realise that it's a whole car crash thing. Then one voice turns out to be a very angry, I think, friend or relative of the other driver who was killed. I'm not quite sure what the symbolism is with him being another guy in another snow station. But the other voice is a woman's voice. She's giving you instructions and helping you decode these messages, and that's the voice of your sister. And towards the end of the episode, when everything's getting really messed up, then you've gone outside to start some generators, and on the way back inside, it's when it goes full on, like, crazy foreshadowing stuff. The woman who has the voice of your sister, she just says over this tannoy, like, "James, come back, I can't feel my legs. What's happening?" And when you think, oh, car crash, and he left, oh, that's really sneaky. But the reason I don't like it is because if I hadn't read on TV Tropes that was foreshadowing, I would have completely forgotten it and never worked it out for myself. Because you only see it that one time.
I actually kind of like that because it fits in so perfectly with the narrative at that point that it never occurs to you that to second guess it. But there's a lot of other stuff going on, like some of the voices seem to be talking about stuff that doesn't have anything to do with the current situation, that if you remember that, you can kind of piece together maybe what she said didn't have anything to do with that situation either.
Looking back at episode 3, a lot of the things that are said don't really have much to do with, well, anything. There's an apocalypse. The snow... I keep calling them snow stations, because that's the only two words I know. But the snow stations are under attack. There's a noise on the roof. Okay, actually, with a car crash, that could kind of make sense. But yeah, it's... yeah...
I think, like you said earlier, I'm of two minds of this, where I like how it all ties in together, but also I really liked the self-contained stories, and I feel like that's kind of like the best example of that is episode 3, which had my favorite setting of all of them, but I thought it was like the weakest chapter overall, specifically because it, like, episode 1 and 2, as much as they tie into episode 4, they were still very much self-contained on their own. But episode 3 was obviously setting up episode 4, and so it felt more, it felt less self-contained, and its ending by itself was less satisfying, and I think it ruined, like, that kind of dropped the ball on what was a really cool setup. Because I really liked, and honestly what I was hoping for with that episode was that the thing that was happening, like, why'd we get cut off? What is this? What do we have to write out? I thought it was going to be, like, I thought it was going to be nuclear war, especially when I saw when I input one of the codes and I saw some, and it was like processing, and it said scorched earth, and I was like, oh, am I launching nukes? Is that like is my job, like, unbeknownst to us, are we like launching nukes for this nuclear war? And I thought, like, I loved that idea and became like really invested in it, and then it kind of just became this weird nebulous thing, or they, as they kept calling them and not saying what they were, and then I just got less into it, and then it just ended like really open-ended to set up episode 4, and that left me kind of disappointed, because I was like, oh, there was a really cool thing going here, that just kind of dropped off. But
honestly, I thought it was going in a different direction. I thought it was setting up for 4 the whole time, but I thought it was actually helping connect to episode 2, because that episode ends with the alien life forms escaping. So I thought for episode 3, when it came to me, oh, bad stuff's happening, I thought that must be related to the aliens that escaped, and the thing that's outside is that thing you helped escaped in episode 2 that isn't one of those flying orb things. And I thought episode 4 was gonna tell you how episode 1 fit into this, but then episode 4 begins and the credits start playing, and then suddenly it just freezes like an old VHS tape, and you realize that the character was watching a TV show. Oh yeah, we should mention that all 3 episodes of that the first 3 episodes are all based on what he saw on that TV show. So, like, they're all technically complete, but they have little elements of himself thrown in now, and they all connect together in a new way because of it.
And another thing about the connections between episodes that I'm not sure I liked so much was episode 1 and episode 4. They're like, episode 1 felt very self-contained, but once you play episode 4, it's like, no, they're they're linked together, and they support each other extremely well. But episode 2 and episode 3, I feel like they didn't tie into episode 4 well as much. Just because, like, oh, episode 2 is the surgery room, but like nothing I really did in there felt like it applied to any of the stuff that happens in 4 or is revealed in 4. And 3 is kind of the same way, where it felt like it existed just to be like, oh, you're in a cold, isolated place. But the setting in itself felt like it didn't, like, neither of those stories felt like they added much to episode 4. Whereas episode 1, it's like it introduces you to the whole level, and you're like playing that level, remembering, oh, this is how everything worked in episode 1. This is where everything's laid out. This is what I did in that episode. And I don't know, those, like, episode 1, episode 4 together, it felt like a great product. But like I don't know.
I would actually make an argument on 2 and 3, because I think they're symbolically important. Like you pointed out, 2 is the surgery, but well, that's probably the best way to put it, because like it's a mixture of the surgery and what he saw on that TV show.
It felt just, I don't know, something about episode 2 being brought back in episode 4 is, oh, it's the surgery room. It felt just kind of like ushered in there, like sort of reusing assets. Not that I think that's what it was, but it felt like the equivalent to, oh, we're reusing these assets. And
the way I saw it was the character was trying to comprehend something, like he's been doing the entire game through the lenses of these sci-fi and horror stories he saw. So episode 2 is the surgery room, but it's not exactly the surgery room. It's just taking what he saw from that TV show, and he's using it to contextualize what he briefly saw when he was in the surgery room. So like there's some stuff there that you would see in such a room, like the TV and or the drill, and so he's putting that into his understanding. And for episode 3, I would argue that represents his hospital room. The reason he saw that information on the microfilm is because it was probably information he saw on a chart or a file near him. He's very isolated and it's very cold, so the symbolism there is kind of obvious. He probably had a radio too, I'm guessing. And if you play the radio in that part, you can actually hear like the doctors saying things.
I guess I just felt more invested in both those settings when they were their own thing.
Oh, I just realized the game is working backwards at that point, because it starts at episode 3, which is when he's at the hospital, then it goes to episode 2, which is when he's admitted to the hospital, and then you go to episode 1, which is the events before the hospital, and I just got that. How did I not notice that already? Fuck.
Yeah, I guess I just felt more invested in both those stories when they were their own thing.
Yeah, that's fair enough. I kind of wish that they followed up on the idea I originally had, and that was like episodes 2 and 3 are connected, like I said, but like the events in episode 1, the Jennifer figure would be revealed as someone connected to the events in episode 2, because episode 2 is when you see the car crash flashes and you see Jennifer's face. And because you've only heard of one other female character at this point, you must assume, it must be Jennifer. And it is, just not in the way I was expecting. I thought Jennifer was actually the alien in that room somehow.
Oh yeah, that's what I thought too when I saw her. I was like, oh, is this the alien?
I don't think she was an alien, because they said the alien they found was dead. I think what the implication was, or at least what I thought it was going to be, was that she was like some sort of ghost creature, like we've seen this before in a lot of horror media today, like the little Japanese girl ghost thing has become really popular. You had like that one video game series, Fear, based around that, so I could totally buy that sort of thing. But then when I'm in episode 4, I realized that couldn't have happened, because that's not an 80s trope.
Yeah.
I was thinking in the wrong decade.
Remember when people made fun of Braid a bit? Because, like, Jonathan Blow is making a sandwich, and then he finishes making the sandwich, and then he points at it and goes, "This sandwich is a metaphor for the atomic bomb." That's... When the symbolism in this game doesn't work, that's kind of what it feels like to me. When it's like, you're operating on an alien. The alien is a metaphor for the policeman who showed up when you killed your sister in a drunk driving accident.
Oh
the
yeah,
monster represents your
blue
guilt.
And red, you got the blue and red lights from that flashing thing, being the lights.
And
of
it makes me feel. It makes me feel really stupid that there's some symbolism that I just flat out don't understand. But the thing I just remembered about the end of episode 3, you leave the snow station, I'm dedicated to calling it that now. You turn on a generator, and when you go back inside, you only see it for a second, which I think is a little bit of a problem, because I honestly didn't realise what it was. I had to look it up. But when you go back inside the... Here it comes, the snow station, it's turned into the bedroom from episode 1 with the old computer. And that's a really powerful thing that makes you think, oh wow, this is all connected and interlocked, but I have no idea what that means.
I think I couldn't see that because of the frame rate issues. I think it closed out before I could see any of that.
I saw that and it kind of freaked me out.
But yeah, it's just like, what is the purpose of it turning into the bedroom?
At first I was kind of mad it was all a dream thing, until I understand what it was doing with that, and I realized, oh wow, this is actually way more interesting.
And I mean, like the writing itself, like especially in the text parts of 1, 2, and 4, like the writing is extremely well done. Like it.
I also noticed it's purposefully simple, especially in like with the text adventure parts. I forgot how many times I saw the word, I think it was disgusting, just like used as a basic description for things at a certain point. Got a little ridiculous. But the simple writing helped make it clear what the mood was, and you didn't have to overthink anything. Like, it knew that sometimes less is more.
I had a bit of an immersion problem in like this showed up in episode 2, and again in 5. Like, it started episode 2 and again in 5, where it's like, oh, this is the U.S. Department of Experimentation or whatever it was. And so it's like, oh, okay, we're in America. It's a U.S. office. Why does everyone have British accents?
Because we're just
Because
that
the game
powerful.
was made in the United Kingdom. No Code is a British developer, and then this popped up again in episode 4, where in episode 1 you see, oh, in the kitchen there's the utility room, and I'm just like, what's a utility room?
It's a utility
Like,
room.
when I hear utility room, I think like, is that where they keep is that where the electrical box is and like the water heater and stuff? And it's like, oh, in episode 4, looking at the walkthrough, you have to go into the utility room because that's where the dad has like his whole liquor collection. So I'm like, oh, is it
I think
a pantry?
maybe they were just looking for a word, because if they called it his liquor room filled with whiskey, then you might have been able to guess what was going to happen.
They could have just called it the lounge.
Oh yeah. They could have just called it a cupboard.
a pantry.
A big cupboard.
Now that's definitely something you don't hear in America.
Oh, you don't have cupboards?
No.
How do you live?
Old people call them cupboards here.
We have closets.
Closets.
Because you close it. But,
You know what's funny? In my room, I technically don't have a closet. I have an area that's supposed to be a closet, but it doesn't have doors.
I don't even have a closet. I just have a rack for my clothes. And also, like, something else in spoiler territory, but this is more a gameplay thing that I, like, once it popped up in episode 1, I fell in love with it. When you're inputting text onto the computers, and, it's affecting the environment. Like, you're like, oh, I'm not, like in episode 2, oh, I'm not replaying memories anymore. I'm actually controlling this thing by inputting text into a computer. Like, by some kind of weird psychological link. And then, like in episode 1, where it's like the phone's ringing, type answer phone into the computer, and you pick up the phone, or you turn off the alarm. And then in the game, the person's like, what? Someone else is here. And then at the end of the episode, where you just like, I mean, this is still a horror game, and like the part that scared me most, the part that got me most, was in episode 1, when you're, because you're sitting in this room, and then you input like open door, and you open the door, and like you start seeing the light pouring in from behind you, and it's walk in, and you hear these footsteps behind you, and like you're sitting there, but also you're the one walking in. That freaks me out, just because I had this feeling that something was behind me, but you can't turn around and look at it, and that always just terrifies me. Like, I've gotten sleep paralysis before. It's scary, and like that's a frequent thing in nightmares for me, and some of the worst nightmares, where I'm stuck. I can't move for some reason. I can't fight back or move with something chasing me or attacking or trying to get me. That kind of paralysis, and like putting it in the game where it's like, okay, something is behind you, but you're not allowed to turn around and look at it. That really got me. Like that, like it was a cool, like it's just a cool feature, messing with time and space by like having you control actual things happening in this with these text prompts in the computer game, but also just like bringing it into that room, like bringing something into that room behind you. That was really cool. I adored that about this game. The presentation was just great in that regard.
It's definitely what I would call the high point of the game too. I'm trying to think of a good horror game where I can say, I've played this horror game and it's good, but nothing in it scared me as much as seeing the silhouette of a door opening in this one. And nothing even happens. Like nothing jumps out at you. There's no screamer or jump scare, but it's just
I just
unnerving.
remembered one game. I just remembered one game that did scare me more with one simple moment than this one did.
Go on.
There's this Japanese-only Nintendo DS game called Nanashi no Game, or The Nameless Game. And the story of it is stupid because it's basically just The Ring, but with a video game. But the first 3 days of the 7 days of the game are fucking terrifying. Like, there's one point in... Actually, there's a lot of low moments, but I just want to talk about them real quick. There's a part in the first day where you're walking around the apartment really slow because the controls are terrible, and when you're exploring one room, if you look at the painting carefully, you'll notice that it's slowly, very slowly changing from its original form to having sort of like a skull in it, but it doesn't look quite right and it never fully forms, and you're just wondering what the fuck just happened. There's in episode 2, you have to keep checking the game in the game to get hints on how to escape, and it has a lot of good build up on how the episode plays out. And since you're not playing the main character at that point, I'll just spoil that it doesn't end well for that character. And episode 3 is the one that really fucked with me, and this is a brilliant scare. There's a part where you're walking through a hospital and you enter this area that's like covered, the walls and the floors and ceiling are like covered in splatters of blood, and you reach this table and you see one of the white ghosts with the black soulless eyes on an operating table, and it starts getting up and you're like, nope, fuck this, because I'm right at the door. So I exit, and then the screen goes to black, and then the screen loads to the last room I was in, and there he is, just staring right at me, right in my face, not doing anything. And I just sat there for like 10 seconds just petrified, and then I realized, oh, I really do have to go the other way, don't I? That is just such a cool moment. And like, the door frame scene in this game is just like almost on par with that, except it uses a lot of slow build up instead of sudden shock. But yeah, I would definitely say this is one of the best games I've played this year, and that includes stuff like Lisa and Alpha Protocol, and like, you know what, I'm not gonna say Dragon Age Origins because fuck the deep roads, but you get what I mean. But yeah, this game is really, really flawed, but it does so many things I've never seen done in a game before, and it handles so much of it so well, and like ends on just the right notes. It's very clever. It has a surprisingly good story, even though it is kind of cliched when you get down to it. It just knows how to get the execution down. And I like that it uses a lot of cinematic techniques you normally don't see used in games much, which is hilarious because games have been trying to be like movies for so long. They never realized what it takes to actually be like a movie, and it's not spectacle. It's using the language of film. And I think this game does that really well while doing other neat things like trying to make you feel like a character in one of those situations, like at the station when you're just doing menial work, and in order to build tension, which is just like a new concept for me. I'm like just really impressed with this overall, despite all the walking sections being like 7 FPS. But yeah, I would definitely say you should absolutely get this game, but only if your computer is good, because this thing will destroy any other type of computer.
Yeah, I have to agree. I still enjoyed this game, and I think it's like you said, its execution it's great. I love how it plays with using text to alter space, and like it takes such simple setups and makes them scary, and the optimization issues are a problem that I would be surprised if they ever got fixed. So yeah, make sure your computer's good, play on lower graphics, and yeah, pick this game up. It's a good horror game.
Closing thoughts. I would give this game the much desired Sonic Adventure 2 award for a game that starts with like the best opening in the world, and it's great, and it really just sucks you in from the moment you start, and then it kind of loses steam.
What are you talking
And
about?
it
Sonic
never
Adventure 2 is amazing. It's perfect.
Much like Sonic.
I love spending 30 minutes looking for randomized gem locations.
Hey, the Emerald levels are great. Like, I do not get the hate those get. I love those levels.
Give up the emeralds or die. I don't love you.
I once spent 30 minutes on the military base gem hunt because one of the gems spawned in such an awkward place that the radar was completely useless.
But much like Sonic Adventure 2, even though this game never quite reached for me the heights that it got to at the beginning, it's still very much worth playing and good. It's just, I kind of wish it could have just kept on at the same rate at which because yeah, that episode 1 just totally grabbed me.
And much like Sonic 2, Shadow is responsible for killing Maria in a drunk driving accident. Actually, I may be onto something here, because when you get to Shadow the Hedgehog and it turns out he exists because of the black aliens, and the reason the military thing happened was because he was on it. No, wait. I'm now remembering Sonic Battle and Sonic Chronicles, and I think it might have been because Ermil was there. Oh, fuck it.
How will Sonic
Sonic
Forces
Chronicles is
change to
canon.
Shadow Canon?
Get a load of this!
Oh yeah,
wanted
if
to
you
say
didn't know, Sonic Mania ends suggesting that Infinite is the gem that causes the events of that game and changes time by throwing Sonic out of it. So the reason Shadow is evil now is because it's a different timeline. But that doesn't explain why modern Sonic is also there. What the fuck? So yeah, Stories Untold, very good.
Yes.
Go buy it.
All of us agree. Flawed, but worth your time.
And now let's go ahead and figure out what Danny has picked for us to play next episode.
So,
Go for it.
So the few games I've picked have all been ones I played and loved. So I thought I'd go for a game that I have, but have never gotten around to playing. And are any of you familiar with a developer called Easy Game Station?
That sounds familiar, but it doesn't ring a bell.
Okay, well, in honor of Comic-Con happening quite recently, I decided to pick a game made by a developer who specializes in Dojin Soft games, which, if you don't know, they're like Dojin circles, but for video games. They primarily make fan games for fun, but they'll usually
Like Tiffitan X.
they'll usually put them out at little things like Comic-Con and then never again. So the game I picked is from Easy Game Station, and the game is Chantalise: A Tale of Two Sisters. It is a action role-playing game that was released back in 2006.
Oh yeah, the Racketeer prequel.
Yes, it is.
The Racketeer
Same developers
prequel.
as Racketeer. It's
Capitalism ho. Capitalism will
it's a
kill us all.
very PS1 looking game that they put out in 2006, and it's just I've never played it, so I don't know how it plays, but I'm looking forward to it because it looks good. And
Yeah, I've been meaning to get to that one too, so that'll be interesting. Oh, and I should mention, since this is a thing not many people know, do you remember that PS1 game Square released called Threads of Fate that cost like $200 at one point, but now doesn't?
I've heard of it, but do not know anything about it.
Well, the developer you just mentioned made a fan sequel for it called Duo Princess, where you play as one of the main characters of that game, Mint, and her sister, who was like a secondary antagonist for that game.
Yeah, they Easy Game Station.
So now
They
you
started
know.
out with fan games. Like their first 3 games they put out were all fan games for Azumanga Daioh. a snowball fighting one, a puzzle one, and then a volleyball one. So they have a lot of fan games, and then they started making some original ones, and they're good games. At least Racketeer is, which I've played, and I'm looking forward to Chantilly's next time on IndieCent.
And I can't wait to see how uncomfortable Elmo is with all the anime.
Ah!
Elmo got through 100% orange juice. He'll be fine.
Yeah.
Elmo, you know I'm gonna make you play a porn game one day from Sakura game.
I'm just gonna make you play Joe Danger 2. And then Joe Danger 3. And then Joe Danger 1 again.
We can't do that. There's only so much to talk about with No Man's Sky.
I don't know if
You weren't here, Danny. But that episode was a disaster.
the good kind of disaster, you know, like The Room.
No Man's Sky is Joe Danger 4 confirmed.
We'll see you next time for Chantilly's, and I got nothing.
I don't know if it changes the way this episode will be heard, but I just want you guys to know that I had a job interview right before I came in to record this, so for 2 hours I've been sat here with a headset, but also a suit and tie. I am really dressed up to record.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
You listened to me talking about the Chinese developer putting actual porn on Steam in a suit and tie.
Yes, but I looked dapper.